Thank you very much. Well, I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker tonight, Christopher Lemmon, actor. He is comfortable on stage, television, or film. Producer. A film titled Publicity Stunt will begin production shortly. Accomplished pianist who graduated from the California Institute of the Arts with degrees in classical piano and composition, and humanitarian. He and his wife, Gina Raymond, both serve on the New England Division's Board of Advisors to the American Cancer Society and have recently been elected as ambassadors to the Eastern Division. But tonight, we're going to catch a glimpse of Chris Lemmon, the talented writer. In 2006, he published A Twist of Lemon as a tribute to his father, beloved American actor Jack Lemmon. Each of you are receiving an autographed copy tonight that Chris can personalize after the program if you desire. I must admit, I had this book on my desk for months. I watched it move. It moved from my desk to the dining room table, it moved to the den, and then finally I picked it up. And honestly, I couldn't put it down. Sure, I felt like I knew the character Jack Lemmon, and I loved him like all of America. Many have written that his father was beloved because he represented every man, but I just liked him. I liked his neuroticism in The Odd Couple. I liked his integrity in The China Syndrome. I liked his femininity in Some Like It Hot. And I loved his petulance in Grumpy Old Men. He made me laugh. That's more than enough for me. You ever hear the saying, you plant apples, you get apples? So you will not be surprised tonight that you will be enchanted by this book. You will be enchanted by this man. His vulnerability, his honesty, his openness, and his ability to make you laugh out loud. It is a rare treat to greet in a few hundred pages the entire primordial soup of our humanity. But that's what Chris did. He weaved a tale from him to us, from his particular experiences to our universal ones. That is what A Twist of Lemon will give you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's magic time. Chris Lemmon.
Hey, Ramhead, come on over here and give your old man a hug. I walked over to the bed where Pop lay, tubes running out of him, connected to the numerous medications that were keeping him alive and somewhat comfortable. He was bald now from the chemo, but his face belied the battle that was raging inside of him. His smile, his beautiful everyman smile, the one the world had adored for over half a century, was still in place. I leaned down and hugged him as hard as I dared. "What you got working?" I asked, glancing at the TV mounted on the wall across the room. "Pebble Beach. Jake's doing great. If he keeps this up, he's got a real shot." I sat next to him and studied his face as he watched the golf tournament that had meant so much to him for so many years, an event he surely would never play in again. I knew it. He knew it. We all knew it. Yet he never showed any anger, and his spirits never flagged. He was the bravest man I'd ever met. During my half-century with Pop, I'd felt just about every emotion a son could feel about his father, from love to hurt, from joy to anger. Over the course of those years, I'd done things with him and gone places with him that left me with memories I'll cherish for the rest of my life. And now, as I sat in that hospital room, watching the play of emotions on my father's face, I knew I was about to go through the final experience, saying goodbye. Cancer has to be one of the toughest ways to go. I knew that. I'd lost my mother to it 13 years before, but you'd never have known it from Pop. Through it all, I never heard him complain once. All he cared about, his only concern during the final days, was for us, his family. It had been much the same way with my mom, a tough and selfless woman. She'd been told she'd be lucky to live until September at the outside, but she'd wanted more than anything to celebrate one last Christmas, her favorite holiday, with her family, and that's what she did. She passed the day after. Mom and Pop had fallen in love when they met at New York's Actors Studio many years ago. She was gone now. Soon they both would be. And as I did with her, I sat with Pop for the following months and replayed all the movies in my head, all the good times, all the bad, like I was in some huge dream theater. I let that ultimate gift we humans have been bequeathed do its thing. I let the memories open up and let the film roll. Those are my 2 pages. All the, the wonderful gals and guys who have done these terrific essays, for lack of a better term, mini memoirs, were told they had to do it in 2 pages. And it's really kind of an interesting exercise in writing to make somebody try to grab an entire world and explain it in 2 pages. But that's kind of what it's all about, and that's what we're doing here tonight. Linda Pellico, Elaine Gustafson, and Lisa Houghton came to my house about 2-3 months ago and sat in front of me and presented this idea to me and said, would you like to speak at this event? And my first thought was, I've never met anyone who can talk more than I do. Who is this Linda Pellico gal? I sat on the couch for what I thought was going to be about a half hour, and I believe they got there around 10, and sometime around 4 in the afternoon, you know, it was amazing. I actually found myself raising my hand. There was such passion, and it's just such a wonderfully passionate undertaking. I'm not going to sit here and tell all of you in this room how important nurses are. They are angels. I lost both my mother and father to cancer, whom I adored more than anything on the face of this earth, except for my wife. If I don't say that, I'm in big trouble. And during that time, those months, if it wasn't for the nurses, there were so many times, but you all know that. What's really interesting about tonight is you're going to get to hear from people who are not just angels, they're damn good writers. It isn't easy to take a whole world and put it into 2 pages, because those 2 pages have to contain a whole world. And they have to describe that whole world that you're about to experience. Mine came about when I was sitting next to my father. As many of you know, I mean, cancer's touched us all, hasn't it? Sometimes the end can be protracted. And Pop was there, Mom was too, for many weeks, months. And he was asleep. He was there, but not really. And I tried to find a defense, because he wasn't just my pop, he was my best friend, you know? And so I'd sit next to him, and the only thing I could find was to hold his hand and remember those good times. And after he left, you know, it took about a year to realize it, but there was just something missing in my life. There was a hole that I needed to fill somehow. And just instinctively, I started to write. I started to write those memories down. And as I wrote them down, the big ones, they kind of peeled away, and there was another layer underneath, and another layer underneath that, and another layer underneath that. And the next thing I knew, I was glimpsing the catharsis that I was searching for. And I had this wonderful kind of body of memories of my father and I, really meant for myself and for my kids. But you know, I adored him so much, and I knew how much the world adored him as well. And I felt kind of compelled to share the book with the world, and so that's how it came about. But before I could write those 2 pages, I had to write the whole world. What these wonderful contestants that you're going to meet tonight, contestants isn't a really good word to call them, but that's what I guess they are, the winners, our 3 winners, we'll call them that. They're all winners, because if you guys have read these essays, these mini memoirs, I'll call them, they are just absolutely unbelievably good. It's just amazing. Yes, some of them are trained writers and this and that, but the technique that they show in doing it is really astounding. And for them to be able to express, as you will hear later on, that whole world in just those 2 pages, trust me, it's not an easy thing to do. And I think it's fun. Again, you know, God bless you all for being nurses, but you're writers too. And what's really exciting for me about being here tonight is I get to talk to you about writing. And what you do is write a small memoir. And one of the most important things to do in memoir, aside from creating that entire world, is to find a voice. finding a voice is the most important thing about memoir. When I wrote my book, it was up to me to find my father's voice, and mine as well. I mean, my father's voice, which the world knew so well. And it's not just, Jack Lemmon. Hey, two Irish guys walk out of a bar. It could happen. Or his best friend's voice, Walter Matthau. I wake up in the morning, there's little notes on my pillow. Say we're out of cornflakes, F you. Took me 3 hours to figure out that F you meant Felix Unger. You know, I was in the kitchen with my dear wife Gina last night, and and we were talking about tonight, and she says, "Well, what are you going to talk about?" I said, well, I don't plan these things. I like to be off the cuff about it all. I think I may talk about this, talk a little bit about that. She said, you've only got a half hour. I said, what? Well, you mean I've only got a half hour? I'm a lemon. It takes us a half hour to say hello. So. With that in mind, that's the end of my formal lecture. Are there any questions? No. Actually, you know what, though? To keep it off the cuff, I mean, if there are any questions, if anybody wants to, stick your hand up in the air as I'm blathering away up here, because I've found those kind of tend to be the funnest thing to do anyway. So don't be shy, and we'll chat a bit. But anyway, about what these gals have done, it's really, really fascinating that aside from being the angels they are, that they have the time, the wherewithal to put together something like this, and Linda too. I mean, where'd you come up with this idea anyway?
I just think it's magic. You write to learn what you think.
Exactly, and there's 15 different series going on the air right now that are doing pretty much basically the same thing. Look at all the popular series about nursing and how important it is. It's really astounding. See? That you had this idea to begin with, and the stories that these guys run across every day, and the gifts that they give, the ability to place that into writing and to give us, those gifts in the form of words, is really extremely moving. It's what I tried to do. And it brings to mind one chapter in the book. Let me search for 2 seconds, see if I can find it, where I talk about my mom. Oh, bear with me here. I'd like to read it for you, because I think it actually is, I wasn't planning on doing it, but I think it actually is pertinent to what we're talking about tonight. You want to stand up and do a quick joke for him, Linda, while I'm finding this?
Two Irish men walk into a bar.
A stroll in the park with my little duckies. My mom loved saying that and loved being in New York and walking through Central Park on a beautiful day in 1988. Accompanied by her 2 little duckies, as she called my sister Stephanie and me. I hadn't seen her this happy in a while, and even though she'd always kept on her game face, and would until the end, today she was beaming. Certainly no one seeing us that day would have known that our destination was Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Like Pop, Mom was the real deal, made of tough stock, born and raised in Peoria, Illinois, the daughter of John Boyd Stone, chairman of the board of the First National Bank of Peoria. She attended Foxcroft School, then followed her heart to the New York stage, where she met and fell in love with a feisty young actor named Jack Lemmon. The two of them went on to star in 4 different live television series together, then moved together to Hollywood, where her career took off, and then in a matter of few years, she'd seen their marriage crumble away to nothing. And here she was on that sunny day in New York, 62-year-old Emmy-nominated actress Cynthia Stone, walking through Central Park with her 2 little duckies. Only one thing was wrong. She was dying of cancer. I happened to be with her on the visit to the doctor a year before, when she told us that the stat blood work had come back with disappointing results. I knew the news had hit her hard, but she did not let slip any indication of fear or shock. She wouldn't do that in front of her child. Showing anything less than absolute strength was never an option for her. Actually, the struggle had begun 2 years earlier, when, during a routine operation, the doctor found that she had colon cancer, and that it already had metastasized to surrounding organs. Now, 2 years later, here was Mom, heading back to the hospital, ready to fight one last battle, but knowing in her heart that this would probably be the last spring day she'd have to walk through Central Park. The kind of strength that Mom showed then, and that my father would show 15 years later, is not easily come by. These were people of a different generation, stronger and more resilient. After our walk in the park that afternoon, when doctors at Sloan Kettering came into the examining room to meet Mom, a patient who'd been diagnosed as terminal, she found all of us telling jokes and laughing. The doctor, who was one of the best in the world, stared at us like we were nuts. But Mom, with her ever-present dignity, introduced herself and explained our behavior by saying we'd simply had such a marvelous day. I remember the doctor pulled me aside and asked if Mom fully understood the situation. I explained that she did, that we all did, but that she was the strongest person any of us would ever know. And this was how she would face whatever was ahead of her. And in fact, Mom remained that way to the end, making every arrangement herself, from the largest to the smallest, even going so far as to schedule flights, hotels, and rental cars for her own funeral. Mom's ultimate display of strength, though, came when she made up her mind that she was going to see one more Christmas. Despite the doctor's dire ultimatum of September at the latest, she'd done exactly that. On Christmas Eve, her entire family gathered at her house in Miami, where she'd insisted on being for her final days. As we sat at the dinner table, Bud, her husband, brought her out of the bedroom to tearful applause. She'd cheated the Grim Reaper by 3 months, and she'd managed to remain strikingly beautiful through it all. I remember she looked at each one of us for a long moment, her eyes still alert, still aware, and then she took her husband's hand, smiled one last elegant smile, and went back into the bedroom. She fell asleep that night and never woke again. 2 days later, she was gone. Though she was taken from us at a criminally early age, I thank God she was here long enough to meet my bride, Gina. I was a lemon, after all, and would need careful looking after. I just wish she could have met her grandchildren. She was laid to rest in Peoria, Illinois. At her funeral, I remember seeing Pop cry, and it struck me at that moment that though I'd seen him do it, the very same thing on numerous times on film, I'd never before seen him cry in real life. Later, I learned that not only had the loss of Mom and my reaction to it been deeply moving for him, but it all allowed him momentarily to turn away from the influence of his stiff New England upbringing and to cry over the loss of his own parents as well, something he previously had never been able to do. That afternoon, as I walked away from the burial site, the finality of it all hit me, and my knees momentarily weakened. I remember Pop was right there holding me up and helping me down the path to the waiting car. Just want to say how honored I am, Margaret, thank you so much, and to all the 300-plus nurses at the School of Nursing. It's really a great honor to be here tonight. Thank you so much, and I think what you're doing is just marvelous. Not just what you do every day and what you're going to do every day for the rest of your lives, but also this wonderful evening where you're going to share your memories, your mini memoirs with all of us. And if there aren't any questions, then I'm going to leave you because I don't want to leave you on a depressing note. I'm going to read one fun one before I go. So here we go. This one's called Jack Lemmon's Son. This is just fun. It has nothing to do with anything else. Growing up, the one question I was asked more than any other was what it was like to be Jack Lemmon's son. And if you think about it, that's a very strange question for a kid to have to answer. I could respond to people by saying how great Pop was, just as would any other kid who loved his father. But that wouldn't answer the question for them. They wanted more. When somebody asked Pop a question he didn't want to answer, his pat cop-out line was, "Hello, operator, we got a bad connection." I had my cop-out lines too, but the real reason I couldn't answer the Jack Lemmon's son question was that there were some pretty sensitive issues involved, and that particular question, simple as it was, cut straight to the heart of them, making me feel vulnerable and exposed. Truth is, from the beginning, I struggled with the reality of being a star's kid. No, I was happy with my life, my parents, and my family. I just wasn't overjoyed about the whole Jack Lemmon's son thing. Nothing against Pop, of course. I adored him. It's just that going through your entire adolescence identified as an object and not a person got, well, old. "You're Jack Lemmon's son. He is my absolute favorite.
You tell him I said hello, will you? Did I tell you he was my favorite? George. George, come over here. You won't believe who this is. This is Jack Lemmon's son. What was your name again, dear? Oh, well, that doesn't matter. You just tell your daddy I love him.
I remember the first time it really dawned on me who my father was, and by that I mean who he was to everyone else. I was in the 3rd grade, attending a small school in Santa Monica. It was recess, and the central courtyard was a buzz of activity. I was attempting to execute just one pull-up on the parallel bar when a red-faced kid came running up to me. "Hey, Lemonade," he said belligerently. "You see that kid over there? His father's Robert Conrad. That's the guy who acts Jim West on The Wild Wild West. He's more famous than your dad." I hung there for a couple of seconds thinking about what he said, and I shook my head. I said, "Yeah, well, sure he is. He's Jim West." And as the kid ran away, I remembered thinking, I didn't know my dad was famous. I thought he was just an actor. I was aware, of course, of the excitement he created wherever he was, although I didn't quite understand it. I remember as a kid being out with Pop a number of times and being elbowed out of the way by well-meaning but overly eager fans. During those early years, whenever I was out with Pop, I spent a great deal of time staring at the backs of excited strangers. It was disorienting and confusing, and I didn't always handle it well. It did lead to some humorous situations, though, like the time Pop and I were riding down the lobby in the elevator at Manhattan's Carlisle Hotel, and a sweet older lady got on about the 30th floor. She spent the next 10 floors doing a series of double takes at Pop and smiled broadly and pointed and exclaimed, "Jack Lemmon, alive." Jack Lemmon's son followed me to high school in the Red Rocks of Sedona, Arizona. By 15, I was a leather-fringed, love-beaded, granny glasses-wearing hippie. It was 1969, after all, who had developed a somewhat serious identity problem, a kind of monkey-on-his-back situation. The years of object instead of person had gotten to me, and I had some painful social issues. Whenever I was around people, especially attractive young ladies, I was compelled to come on strong so that Chris, not Jack Lemmon's son, could be the center of attention. "Hey, how are you? Don't I know you from somewhere?" In a school of 120 students, most of whom had a few issues themselves, this didn't fly too well. As a result, throughout most of my high school years, I was pretty much a social outcast. Jack Lemmon's son stayed with me through my college years as well, but by this point, I had learned a few lessons and gotten some pretty valuable input from friends and mentors, finally coming to realize that I didn't need to live my life solely for the approval of others. I'd calmed down, developed a personality, and was finally coming into my own. This was also the time when Pop was doing some of his most important work, including the film Missing, Save the Tiger, and China Syndrome. Because his career was in high gear, Jack Lemmon's son activity was at an all-time high as well. But at least by then I understood what all the fuss was about. For all those Jack Lemmon sonners out there, he was their best friend. He was the guy they invited into their homes or spent a couple of hours with at the theater. They knew this man, and they liked him a lot. He was the guy who could make them laugh or make them cry, and he did just what they would do had they been faced with the situations that confronted him, like the loss of a son, or lack of meaning in their lives, or, hey, even a nuclear meltdown. He was just like them, they were just like him, and when they met me, they wanted me to let Pop know they loved him, appreciated who he was, and agreed with everything he did. Finally, by then, my response was heartfelt and honest. I will tell him, and thanks, I agree. By the time I reached my 30s, I was having a ball. I'd done a load of stage work, starred in a string of TV shows and a number of films, and was enjoying a nice run in a popular TV series. One day around that time, Pop and I were walking through a shopping mall, and people were stopping me for my autograph. But for some weird reason, no one was hitting on Pop. He put up with this atypical situation, making his usual under-the-breath comments. "Hello, sweetheart. You, over here, star." When we were alone again, he turned to me and thumped me on the back. "All those years of being Jack Lemmon's kid, and now it's Who's the Old Fart with Chris Lemmon." His remarks stopped me in my tracks. All along, he'd understood the whole Jack Lemmon's son thing, but he also had understood that it was one of those things I'd have to figure out on my own. This was a life lesson. I gave him a hug. "You're a great Pop," I said, smiling. He laughed, hugged me back. "Yeah, now pull yourself together, people are talking." Since he's been gone, I've heard Jack Lemmon's son less and less, when now, of course, I'd finally like to hear it more. I guess that's life. During his tribute at Pop's funeral, writer Larry Gelbart made a remark that is painfully true. "The redwoods are falling," he said,
And of course, Pop was one of them, along with Walter and Gregory Peck and Katharine Hepburn and so many others. They were Hollywood's royalty, and now they're gone and not likely to be replaced. Fortunately, however, we still have them, as will our children and their children's children. And best of all, we have them forever at their moments of shining glory. We're able to be with them over and over as we watch films like Save the Tiger, The Odd Couple, To Kill a Mockingbird, and On Golden Pond. Thanks to the movies, we have them, and we always will. And incidentally, these days, if someone were to walk up to me and say, "Aren't you Jack Lemmon's son?" not only wouldn't I mind, I'd be grateful.
Well, I'm pretty sure at this point that I have fumbled my way through my allotted half hour.
It really gives me great pleasure. I'm honored to be able to turn the stage over to these terrifically talented angels, and with all of my congratulations. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. And now let's enjoy some other memoir. Thank you.